In 1854, the American government tried to convince Chief Seattle to sell his tribal lands to America. In a famous speech in March of that year, Chief Seattle gave his response. The exact text of the speech has been lost, for among other reasons, the chief chose to speak in Lushootseed, which is a language not known by white men. But apparently the gist of his talk was to talk about the meaning of the land. He saw the land as holy, as a spiritual entity in itself, and ultimately he concluded, the land does not belong to us. We belong to the land. Throughout the book of Vayikra, and in particular Parshot Behar and Bechukotai, there is a vision of the land of Israel as being holy, as being a spiritual entity. We know that in Behar and Bechukotai, once every 7 years we must give a year to the land for Shabbat ha'aretz, the Shabbat of the land. And if we do not give Shabbat to the land, we will go out into exile to allow the land to reclaim the Shabbatot that were not given to it. And in fact, in the book of Yirmiyahu, and at the end of the book of Divrei Hayamim, we are told that the 70 years of exile in Bavel is to allow the land to reclaim the 70 years denied to it as Shabbat, as Shabbat ha'aretz, during the course of the first temple times. We know in later times, we know, and in Sefer Vayikra talks about the land being contaminated by sin and ultimately vomiting out those who defile it. In our times, Rabbi Kook has written very poetically about the holiness of the land and his great love of the land. Now, ultimately, this begs the question, because Chief Seattle religiously had pagan beliefs. His beliefs included the worship of nature, which seemingly are anathema to Judaism, which is monotheistic, believes in one God, and is adamantly against all forms of idolatry. And in fact, so often the religious Zionist community in Israel, because of their great love for the land, have often been accused by certain circles of worshipping the land and creating a form of idolatry as a result of their deep connection to the land. So this seeming similarity between Chief Seattle and Rabbi Kook and Sefer Vayikra, I think, could allow us to try to highlight what is the difference. What is the difference between a belief in holiness and of the land, of a spiritual entity, and a deep connection to a land which on one side leaves you on the side of idolatry, and on the other side leaves you within Judaism. Now, the three basic approaches to see how God relates to the world. One approach sees God as being transcendental. God is not in the world. He's not part of the world. There are two separate entities. There is God and there is the world. There is interaction between them, but ultimately they are distinct and separate. The other extreme is Pantheism. Pantheism sees God as present in the world, but also as limited by the world. Pantheism leads to an identification between God and nature. In the ancient pagan world, this led to the worship of nature. The world seemed vast, awesome, terrifying, and in many different forms, nature was worshipped in the ancient world. And more modern versions of pantheism appear in thought of thinkers such as Spinoza, was excommunicated for his beliefs. But between these two extremes of transcendentalism and pantheism, there's a middle approach. And this middle approach is the heart of Jewish mysticism, whether Hasidut or Kabbalah. And this is approach defined as philosophically as pantheism, which links together God's transcendentalism and God's immanence. This belief God is infinite, God is one, God is beyond, and much more than the world and the universe. But together with that, God's presence pervades all of life, all of existence. God is both transcendental and immanent. In the phrase of the Medrash, Hakadosh Baruch Hu Mekomo Shel Olam Ve'ein Olam Mekomo. God is the place of the world. The world is not the place of God. It's not that in the world there's a place where God is, but within God is the place of the world. Actually, this was best explained. One of my sons, when he was 5 years old, explained this once to my then 3-year-old daughter, that my daughter Noah at age 3 came back from kindergarten and said that God is in the Shemayim, God is in the heavens. And then my son Hillel, who was then 5, tried to explain to her that God is everywhere. But she didn't quite understand, so we tried to find how to explain this. So we looked around, they were sitting in the dining room, and said, it's like God is like the house. Wherever we are in the house. Whatever room we're inside the house. And this analogy explains God, the world is inside God. But everywhere we are in the world, we're part of God and linked to God. Now, this view of pantheism, as opposed to classical transcendentalism, really reflects to two different ways of looking about how the world was created. We know that religion believes that the world was created, that existence came out of nothing. In Hebrew, it's yesh ma'ayin. However, most people understand an existence out of ein, meaning nothing, that there was just God, there was nothing else, and suddenly God came and created a world which is now something new that wasn't before. However, the Kabbalistic understanding of yesh ma'ayin is not existence from nothing, but existence from nothingness. And nothingness in Hebrew wouldn't be ein, but ayin. Nothingness is what's used to describe a reality that we're unable to grasp, beyond our comprehension, beyond our ability to touch. As a result, it's nothingness because our lack of ability to be in direct touch with it. So creation in Jewish mysticism is from the nothingness, which is the divine, which is ungraspable, existence, something that's tangible, ultimately emerged. And this approach would see that ultimately the divine, on some level, on some layer, still pervades existence itself. And I think we could see it if we think about the Big Bang. It's been often pointed out how the Big Bang is in line with biblical cosmology in terms of that there's a certain point of creation, that before that there wasn't the world, and at some point the world emerged. So on the surface, you would say that the Big Bang is appropriate for existence coming out of nothing. However, in reality, if we think about it, the Big Bang is telling us that existence came out of nothingness, because certainly before the Big Bang, there was something. We don't know what it is. We have no ability to define it. Even Stephen Hawking is hard-pressed to define what was before the Big Bang. It was a reality that we have no way of grasping. But from that, ultimately, existence and reality emerged. And in fact, the yesh ma'ayin, the original understanding, is in fact the Kabbalistic understanding. As Professor Yehuda Liebes has shown, the phrase Yesh Ma'ayin ultimately stems from a phrase in Sefer Yetzirah, the ancient Kabbalistic work, which clearly there the translation is existence from nothingness. If the divine pervades all, so we may ask, so why are some places special and other places less special? Some places more holy, other places less holy. Again, an analogy to the physical world may be of help to understand this as well. We know all matter is made out of atoms, and atoms are filled with energy. But the energy of the atoms, there are forms where this energy is more evident, more released, and there are parts of matter that this energy is more subdued. The sun, fire, the energy is very revealed. In a rock, still filled with energy, it's filled with atoms. That energy could be released, but it is hidden. So places are more, God is everywhere, but the level of the revelation, the revealed presence of God is different from place to place, and that's what leads to the uniqueness and holiness of specific places. If I go back to our original question, the difference between Chief Seattle and Rabbi Kook, the difference is that in Rabbi Kook, God is in the world, but not limited by the world. The divine in the world is a reflection of the infinite God, the infinite light, which is beyond the expanses of our world. And I'd like to conclude by reading a paragraph in Rabbi Kook, which even in translation captures some of the poetics of Rabbi Kook's thought. In the context of the paragraph, Rabbi Kook talks about that people want to be linked to God, but God that transcends the world, we don't have the ability to directly touch, to be close to. So Rabbi Kook calls us to look for God within the world and use that as a portal, as an enter point to reach out to God beyond the world. So I'll conclude by reading a passage about the presence of God within the world itself. Rabbi Kook writes, "It is necessary to show how one may enter the palace by the way of the gate. The gate is the divine dimension disclosed in the world, in all its phenomena of beauty and grandeur, as manifested in every living thing, in every insect, in every blooming plant and flower, in every nation and state, in the sea with its turbulent waves, in the panorama of the skies, in the talents of all creatures, in the thoughts of writers, the imagination of poets, and the ideas of thinkers, in the feelings of every sensitive spirit, and in the heroic deeds of every person of valor." Shabbat Shalom.